このポッドキャストはグランニースパンツの提供でお送りします。
Hello everyone and welcome to 2019, a year for the study of modern visual culture. This is the Atcast and I am one of your illustrious hosts, Soup.
I'm gonna assume that you called yourself illustrious because that's Mari's last name and Ava.
You know what? I didn't even know that, but I'll accept it. I will be the Mari of your rebuild.
You're always the Mari.
Yeah, I think that checks out actually. I feel like that's about right.
That's you. You got the glasses. You got the pink.
Yeah, totally. This week. Oh no, hang on.
Hey!
I'm sorry. I keep forgetting because you start talking and then there's a lull and you don't introduce yourself.
My name.
I'm sorry.
I'm the magnificent Renu.
There you go. You just had to get some emphasis on there. You need people to know who you are.
Yes, clearly, because you don't.
Because I've talked to multiple people about this podcast, and we've all come to the consensus that this podcast is carried by your laughter.
Oh no! Don't make it based on that. That sounds terrible.
If not for that, this podcast would just be boring and nothing. Where I just talk. And then,
I disagree. I think your conversation is very good for this podcast, considering we don't want me carrying the conversation.
Listen, your laughter is what carries this podcast.
Oh my god.
Just accept
Please
it.
Please continue with the beginning, the intro. We don't need to dwell on my laughter anymore.
This week, AT stands for Absolute Territory because we're going to be wrapping up the fall 2018 season, which is, I guess a magnificent way to start 2019. It's not the ideal way that I would have liked, but, it do be like that. It do.
It's fine.
Yeah, I guess it's fine. So, you might have noticed that our opening music is a little different this time. That's right, like the seasonal anime, a new year needs a new opening and ending, preferably one that will get us a little bit less sued.
Hideaki Anno, please.
Anno, please don't nuke us into the ground, please.
Please.
I promise, it's not for profit.
Yeah, we're non-profit.
The song is Love Letter, in quotation not quotation marks, but in parentheses, from you by Desired from the album Plastic Whatever, which is very fitting for us to have the opening to our podcast be a song that has something in parentheses in it.
You're right.
It's a very sort of Ava thing to do.
Yeah, we're Ava all the way.
So we have to disclaim that the song was changed from the original. We've added Renu's lovely vocals to it.
Lovely.
Which I have painstakingly compressed to hell and back to make it sound like that.
Please don't. Yeah, you needed to make it sound less like me and more like someone else did it.
Well, we just needed to sound like the song sounds like, which is to say, kind of like if you took 80s music and then garbled it through a radio and then recorded it with a tape recorder and then played it into a microphone through another radio. So it's very important. It's what gives it that kind of that funky sort of space, like that late 20th century space flavor to it.
I should have recorded it on my laptop microphone and then played that out to my good microphone, and then so that you actually probably would have been better off recording this on a worse microphone, but you know what, it's okay, it's fine. We changed it to reflect its use for our podcast. It's distributed under a Creative Commons license that lets us do that, and so that's completely out of the way, and now we don't ever have to come back to that. But we probably we hope you
will.
like it.
we probably
Let
will
us
at the
know.
end.
If you don't like it, we'll change in Soup's vocals.
Actually, I could probably manage that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and otherwise we're just gonna keep looking for music that someone will write for us for money. And
yeah. Oh, if you guys have suggestions, let us know.
yeah, that would be great.
Like
preferably
non-copyrighted music, or someone who takes music commissions that you think
yes, please
would work for our podcast.
We will pay money for this service.
We will pay money.
We need someone to make us an anime opening. That's all. That's all I'm saying. Just an entire anime opening. Yeah. Anyway, that's out of the way. So what have we been up to? It's been kind of a hot minute since we've talked to each other. It's almost like it was last year. It's funny.
Wow.
It's the news joke. It's the news joke.
You did that. I've heard it many times, but it's okay.
Yeah, but no, I mean, in actuality, it has been like 2 weeks or so since we've spoken. Like maybe even longer, considering the record date of this podcast and the last one.
Yeah, who are you? I don't know you anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we're completely different people. Our cells have, shed off the layers that made us and regenerated, and it's the cells that are talking to each other now are just like they're nobody. Like they don't know each other. The mind remembers, but does the body? Anyway.
Okay, Soupy.
What have you been up to over this glorious winter break?
Dude, I got to play lots of games. I mean, aside from spending time with family and friends, but who wants to hear about that? I've been playing tons of games.
I thought you were gonna say besides spending time playing Yakuza.
Also Yakuza, but aside from Yakuza, because I already talk about Yakuza all the time. I got to play over winter break with my friends in North Carolina. I got to play the tabletop game Red Dragon Inn.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, you have to know this game.
Yeah. I love the games that are like, and this is kind of pertinent to a conversation that we were having about a project that we're not going to expose now, but I love games that are kind of like that, where they're like about the sort of ancillary stuff that happens, right? It's like, oh, this is like, this is about what happens when the adventurers are not adventuring. Like, I think that's really cool.
I think it's super cool. So for those of you who don't know, this is a game based around the concept of a party of adventurers in a fantasy land, probably like D&D, and they stop at an inn called the Red Dragon Inn, and the objective of the game is to get all of your other party members wasted and you be the last person standing.
Yeah. It's one big joke about how every D&D party starts in an inn.
Yes.
So, yeah,
it's great. It's a lot of fun. There's lots of different characters you can choose from. They have lots of different I think like expansion packs that have more characters, and they all have different abilities, wizards, thieves, etc. Like they have all the typical classes, and also a lot of other cool stuff too. There's like a murderer's bunny in there somewhere. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And let's see, I think at first I played a pirate. It was the pirate that, I forget his name, but he has blue skin, and he, like, you can mark people with him and you can give them your token with his little eyeballs on it. I don't know, it's kind of weird, but it's cool. And then I also played the bard in the next round, which, man, I didn't win any of the rounds, but like the bard was interesting because obviously he's like super duper into the gambling, so like he can gather lots of money really quickly, and but the problem is that a lot of his cards, they inflict damage on the other players, but they also inflict damage on himself, so it's a really quick game with a bard in it. Yeah. And yeah, I did not manage that very well. I was like, I have no way to recover health with this character, and I have like 2 health left. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. I went to see my friends in St. Louis too, and we got to they have a Switch, so they let me play the new Smash, and that was a lot of fun. I have never been good at Smash. I've only touched the game like maybe a handful of times my whole life. I think the last time I played was on the 64. And so this game...
Wow, really?
Yeah, I know, right?
Wow. Renu, there were like 3 other Smash games.
I know. But the thing is that's never been my kind of game. It's always like... I've always treated it kind of like Mario Party, right? Where it's like a, it's like a party game kind of thing. You play it with other friends because it's obviously like a, at least 2-player game. So yeah, it's never, sucked me in kind of thing, right? But this game is so gorgeous, though, this latest iteration. They're all really great, but this one really, really impressed me with its graphics. And my friend had already unlocked all the characters in there, so we got to have our free reign of all the stages and all the characters. I really love what they did with the Splatoon character. The Inkling.
I love the Inkling.
Yeah, like I love that the ability is, of course, focused on covering your opponent in paint, but like the fact that all of the models have a version of them with like bits of paint on them or completely covered in paint is just so good.
Yeah. I will say, like, that's what's very impressive to me about the newest Smash is that there's just a lot. Like, it is just kind of everything.
Yes.
And like, it surprises me the characters that they've put in that weren't in the previous ones, like Simon and Richter, where it's just like, you took a handful of pixels and you turned it into a real character that looks still like it would be designed in that era, but like a 3D actual rendered This is very strange, but you did it very well.
It's so well done, right? Like you look at it and you're like, he looks like he would be pulled out of that era. Like they drew him like this originally and then they just made him 3D. But no, he was originally like a pixel dude. And I mean, of course they would have had like design art, but still like it's so wild to see and have him animated and doing all his whip thing and throwing axes and crosses and stuff. It's awesome.
Speaking of, fuck that whip. God, it's so long.
I played as him and I lost so bad.
Listen, all you have to do is like spam the whip attack and you just win because no one can reach you.
Well, yeah, but I was playing... So my friend is playing Mega Man, though, and he wants to main as Mega Man, and so the zoning on Mega Man is really good. And we were also playing... Oh, no. He was playing as Zelda that round.
I see.
Zelda has really good zoning, so...
Okay.
And we were playing on one of the maps. I think it was that western map with the big hole, the big gap in the middle. I don't remember what it's a reference to, but I got outzoned really hard.
Oh, I know what map you mean, actually. I don't know what it's based on either.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do you have like a favorite character?
Let's see. The ones that I ended up winning with out of like... I won like maybe 4 times. Yeah, I think exactly 4 times out of the over 20 some odd matches that we played. But the ones that I won with, and I guess I clicked more with, were Zero Suit Samus, Shulk. I won with the Ice Climbers, but I did not know how to play them. Basically, the only reason I won with them is because I got the Ogre Club.
Nice.
And it basically focused, the Ice Climbers down into, essentially one individual, because it takes the both of them to wield the club. So I didn't have to worry about, like, oh, where's this one going? Where's that one going? I didn't have to keep track of both of them because that was what was throwing me off. And so, yeah, because they were one giant club-wielding duo, I was able to win with them. And Bowser Jr., which is just, the worst, most annoying troll character.
Oh, my God. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like, the character that I really like to play is I just love Ridley. Because Ridley's just the fucking worst. Listen, Rennie, you have to understand that when, like, okay, so this Smash has been, more than any other Smash that I've ever played, been, like, the party game. Like, almost everybody I know likes to play it, and we all have a bunch of controllers collectively as a group now. And like we have like 3 or 4 copies of it because like 3 or 4 people own Switches and everyone owns the game.
Yeah.
Because it's good. But
yeah, it's so good.
like you have to understand that when like my eyes are really bad, right? Like my prescription is probably 2 or 3 years out of date, and I really need to get a new one and some new lenses. But when you have about like I think we actually hit 8 people on
Whoa.
Yeah, because the game supports up to 8 people, and we actually hit that cap. Well, so my eyes are bad, right? I cannot distinguish what happens on that screen. It doesn't matter how big it is. We've played on really big TVs and I still don't understand. Like my eyes are not, my old man eyes are not able to parse what's happening on the screen. And so as a result, I do really well with characters where I don't really have to see anything. So I do really well with characters like Ike, where I can just kind of like spam 1 or 2 attacks in variation. And I will just, as long as I'm like near another person, it will do something. And then Ridley is my favorite because you just do the most shitlord thing, which is you just press side B and you just like jump. And because there's 8 players, you're just going to hit one. And then you just kind of pile drive everyone out of the way and then throw someone off the map.
Oh my God.
And then I just do that from side to side until someone catches on.
Oh my God.
I'm kind of the worst.
I mean, you're just playing to cover up your weaknesses, but also into a strength, which is, I cannot see. Therefore, I will mash the one move that I can.
Yeah. And also, like, you know, if it gets to a smaller amount of people, I can start to make it out, especially because Ridley is such a big character.
Yeah, I mean, just playing with 3 people, like, I felt like an old lady because, like, I was having trouble keeping up with my character because there was one round when we were playing, I think 2 Fire Emblem characters and then 1 something else. And I was one of the Fire Emblem characters, and even though we were colored super differently, I had trouble keeping track of myself on the map.
Yeah.
Because it was also one of the big maps too, so it was like, oh geez.
Yeah, as a game, like despite how different every character looks, it's surprisingly unreadable to the eyeball.
Yeah. I think
I'm legitimately
it just takes
like,
more time
how?
to train and train your eyes.
I don't get how people like are good at this game. I'm just like, are your eyes
they
like
train?
Yeah, like are your eyes just really strong? I don't.
I think they attune their eyes, you know.
I think that's fair. Like my eyes are attuned to Overwatch, so now I understand what that game is about.
See, there you go. See, and for me, if I were to step into Overwatch, I would lose track of everything that's happening, and I'd basically spend all my time trying to learn where the map goes.
Well, yeah, that sounds like fun. What else have you been up to?
I think that's oh, we also played another tabletop game called Mysterium, I think. Let me see. Mysterium. Tabletop? Yes, Mysterium. Okay. So it's basically about you're all a group of psychics and you have one person who is the ghost, and they're trying to convey clues to you about how they died, but they can't communicate with words. So once the game starts, the ghost is not allowed to speak at all, even to explain rules and stuff like that. And so you're going through, as the psychics, going through these floors of the mansion, and you're getting clues from the ghost to figure out who killed them, how they died, and where it happened. And the way that the ghost communicates to you is by handing you these vision cards. So, like, your psychics have a vision, and then they get a certain amount of cards. And basically, it's almost like you have a set of cards in the middle that you're trying to match your cards up to. So, like, for example, if one of the players got a card with a bicycle in it, and so they connected that with one of the portraits of the characters. They had a little snippet of a newspaper that had a bicycle photo in it. And they're like, okay, that matches up. But a lot of the time, it's not that straightforward, right? So one of the motives was that this person, the culprit, was like a a snitch, and so the card had them lying in court, right? And so the way that the ghost conveyed this was by playing a bunch of cards with a rat on it, and it's like, okay, so this person ratted someone out, and so that was how that was figured out. So it's a lot of stuff like that where it's like you kind of have to guess based on these picture cards that you get, how they're related to the picture cards on the table, and try and get it right so that you can proceed further into the mansion and guess the other aspects of the culprit. And then in the end, there can only be one, final culprit. Basically, all these psychics come together with their clues, but there's only actually one villain. And so if you make it to the final floor in time, because you only have like 7 hours, basically one evening, not 7 hours in real time, but in game time, to figure out the culprit. So it was a lot of fun, and I love those kinds of like deductive reasoning, kind of like guessing games, solving mysteries kind of thing. So yeah, I highly recommend it if you have like a larger group. I'd say like around 6 people-ish would be good. And yeah, it was good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that's basically my break. Aside from quality time with family and friends, like I said, was mostly games.
Very nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was your break like, buddy?
Well, to be perfectly honest, my break was just wild. Like,
Okay.
I don't know why I do this to myself, but like I just sort of sign myself away to as many obligations like socially as possible, because
I know why, because you can't say no.
well, yeah.
See, you couldn't even say no then.
It's because when it's break time, it is when I get to go home to my parents' house and hang out with all of my friends that are also home for the holidays.
Of course.
And that just means that I cycle between 2 different, like distinctly different groups of friends that I made in school and that I still keep up with, and the hordes of internet people that I also talk to. So basically I had it was a very sort of odd experience being that busy. I don't think I've ever been that busy over a break, but it feels like, aside from sort of Christmas time, and Christmas was not a relaxing event either, because I had to cook lunch for the family that was coming over, which was like lunch for 11 people. And that's an ordeal that I'll also like get into in a bit. But yeah, so I was basically booked all throughout break. It was like hang out with people and then have a day to myself and then hang out with people. And having a day to myself was like generous at best. It was like maybe sometimes, because sometimes it was literally just, and I like last episode even, right, it was record podcast, then get up and go to D&D, and then the next day go to bowling, and then go home to play Stardew. So like that was kind of what my break looked like, where it was like just sort of hang out with people all the time, to the point where I don't think I ever had more than 2 or 3 days, probably 3 days is the most, just to myself, which is probably a mistake, but also like, I don't know. I mean, it's break. I guess I should maximize the time I spend with my friends or something. It's a very odd kind of feeling that I get, where because of the way that that tends to work, where it's like I'm being very social for very long periods of time without a lot of like break necessarily in between. I end up in a state where I don't want to be alone, but I also really want to be alone. where I'm just like, please leave me alone. But then when I'm alone, I'm just like, I could be hanging out with someone right now though. But
right, you feel restless.
Yeah, I feel kind of restless. It's almost like it's almost like school where like you get off of school and then for the first week you're just like, homework.
What do I do?
I'm good. I'm not late.
Yeah.
But yeah, and of course part of this is amplified by the fact that winter break is like a bunch of events really closely packed together, right? Because it's like Christmas, and then your friends always want to hang out after that, and then you have New Year's, and of course you celebrate New Year's. I celebrated it with some friends. It was a very lovely night, and then New Year's Day I celebrate the Lunar New Year and this is a very like Asian American thing, which is to celebrate Lunar New Year on New Year's because your entire family lives like not in the same place, and it's just more convenient to do it when everyone's home. So
when you actually have days off.
Right. So we celebrate you don't get Lunar New Year off, so you just celebrate it on normal New Year. So, I dressed up in my traditional Korean hanbok. I went to my uncle's house and we had the traditional rice cake soup. And it was, and then we bowed our heads to our elders for money, and they gave us money, which is really nice because, that's the kind of thing where you're just like, yes, this is good. New Year's money. But then, right, because it's like, then I spent the rest of that day doing nothing because I was exhausted because I was, drinking the night before. And then it's like a day of rest, right? The rest of New Year's is my like day of rest. And then January 2nd is like nothing. And then January 3rd is my birthday. So like, oh boy, we went to an escape room that my friend was trying to plan back in like August or something, but we finally got around to it, and that was actually super fun. We did like an Alcatraz themed thing, and we escaped with 7 minutes to spare.
Oh, nice.
Somehow we had to get a couple hints, but it was only ever like one hint per like quote unquote room, and it was. As soon as we got the hint, we were like, oh, okay, we get it. So, yeah, that was super fun. And then, that's not the only thing that happened that night. Then we had dinner, and then we went out to karaoke, and we stayed out until like 12:30. And then I got home, and I immediately fell asleep. Like, I legit was just like, I got home, I drank like 2 or 3 cups of water, and then I immediately passed out. I was like, good night, everybody.
I feel like a lot of vacation ends up being like that. Like you think about vacation in anticipation. You're like, yeah, I'll get to relax, sleep in, do whatever I want, get to see some people. But it is actually exhausting.
Well, so here's the thing, right? Is that was not the end of my adventures. Because the next day I promised for some terrible judgment on my part. Like I have bad judgment. So I decided days ago before this, I decided that I would go to show my friend my favorite ramen place because he's never had like proper ramen before. So I got super drunk on my birthday, and then I woke up at 10 a.m. the next day so that I could go get ramen.
Oh dear.
And also so that I could get ingredients to make breakfast the next day, because I promised my family I would make breakfast the next day because it was basically my last day at my parents' house, and they wanted to have like a breakfast with my grandfather. So I made like Chinese crepes basically, and like scallion pancakes. I made what was it called? I think it's like jidan bing or something. It's just like a lettuce wrap. It's like a crepe lettuce wrap with a bunch of Chinese sauces on it. It was very good. And I wish that was the end of my break, but it wasn't, because then the next day, or no, that evening. Oh no, I remember. Okay. It's all coming back to me now.
Oh jeez.
So
it's all coming back to me.
So okay, all right. So that day that I got ramen, right?
Yes.
Well, I was feeling tired at about 11 because I I mean, I was just feeling exhausted that day because I was out until like 3, and then I had to buy groceries, and then I came back home. So I accidentally fell asleep at 11. I really intended just to like lie down and, oh, that's right, I went to dinner with my family. That's what happened. So that was Friday. I went to dinner with my family and also got ramen in the morning. And then I got home probably around 10-ish, and then I lied down at about 10:30 because I was like, I'm exhausted and I just want to lie down for a bit before I get up and, actually do things. Well, guess what didn't happen? I lied down at 11 p.m. and I woke up at 3 a.m. And I woke up at 3 a.m. and got up and I was like, oh no, I'm not sleepy anymore. So I got onto my computer and I watched a couple YouTube videos, and then it was like 5 a.m. now. And I was like, oh, because this is my new like guilty pleasure. I've been watching there's a YouTube show called Scrapyard Wars put on by Linus Tech Tips, where they build PCs, but using like, they have a PC building competition, except there's always like a stipulation or two they have to follow. Like one of them, the latest season is they're not allowed to use the internet.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. But yeah, so that's I spent like 2 hours watching that because I'm just the worst. And then it was 5 a.m. So I was like, oh, I have like dough to prepare. So I went to go prepare dough. And I really felt an affinity with like Chinese cooking actually in that moment, where I like was preparing this dough and I was like, I feel like I have to bake something, but I don't. It's all like pan fried. And in that moment, I was just like, this is a really Asian thing I'm doing. Like,
yeah,
I understand
Asians,
now. I'm
The oven is never used.
Right.
Right?
The oven is pan storage, right?
Yeah.
Because if you make a dough, you're not putting it in the oven. You're not making a bread.
Yeah.
Or if you are making a bread, you're steaming it, which is like just so funny to me. I've never felt closer to the continent of Asia than at that very moment, except for the time that I was on the continent of Asia.
There you go.
Yeah. So that was interesting. But I prepped that dough. I watched Scrapyard Wars for another hour or so, and then I started making breakfast. And by the time my grandpa got there, I had it done and we ate. And then I had to go get my hair cut and dyed because my appointment was at 11 a.m. So I drove into San Francisco and I got my hair dyed and cut. And then I got home in the afternoon because it took a long time to dye because my hair got really long. I didn't cut it for like 2 or 3 months. So it got super long. So I had to get it, cut and dyed. And the dyeing really took like 2 hours. So I got home. It was like maybe almost 4 o'clock, but that means that I had to quickly take a shower and then go to my friend's like holiday get together, which she put together on the 5th of January because no other date worked for the rest of us because my friends are all like ridiculous and some of them are just spend the entire vacation in like Mexico or Africa. So yeah, I had a holiday party. I got pretty drunk because I didn't actually eat anything after like 12, basically. Like I didn't eat anything really substantial, and I didn't even eat anything really substantial after I got there. So I had maybe a couple drinks and I was drunk. But that was a really good time actually. I had a very good time at that party. My friend got me a cookbook for the Secret Santa. I got my friend a pen. It was a lot of shenanigans. That was where we played Smash with 8 people.
Oh geez.
Yeah. It's even more fun when you're drunk and you just like
I was gonna say, like, no wonder also your coordination was probably off, like in addition to the blindness. I'm so bad at Super Smash Bros. Like we have a joke where we always use the auto pick name generator because it's so funny. They make the best names. Oh yeah.
So one of the names I got the first time we played was No Johns, which was first of all just a god tier name. But then it became a meme because I was playing as No Johns, but I would do this thing where I would lose track of my character and then because of that accidentally fling myself off the map and then not be able to recover. So that became known as a No Johns. It is a no Johns when you throw yourself off the map accidentally.
I committed many no jonks.
yeah, it happens. You're just like, oh, oops. And yeah, so then I had a day to myself, and then I didn't have a day to myself. I drove down the next day, which was to say yesterday as of the day of this recording. So I got up in the morning after being drunk, but I luckily did not have a hangover because I took care of myself and drank lots of liquids. Okay. I drove to the city and ate lunch, and it was, oh my God. Okay, so the drive down here was so bad because January 6th was like the worst storm in like all of California in like months. No joke, the highway I was driving down, the left side of the left side was like basically underwater. I hit it a couple times where I was like, my car would bounce because of how like deep the water was.
Oh.
Yeah, it was pretty silly. Anyway, luckily, the rain was coming down so strongly that my music, I just couldn't hear it all.
Wow.
But luckily I made it down safely, so, no need to worry about that. Now it's all over. No one, I didn't get injured or anything, so my car is fine too, which is nice. But my goodness, it was like, yeah, it was pretty silly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was the most rain we've gotten in a while. I think it was like 1.5 inches or so in LA. Something like that.
Man, California was not ready for any kind of moisture.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, right? Is that we're not ready for moisture, and then for some reason it comes down all at once, and then like the nature thinks that's fine. It's like, well, we gave you enough water, yeah, all at the same time, and like we can't use all of it. So, but yeah, my break has been pretty wild, and I'm not looking forward to the fact that I have an 8 a.m. class this quarter, or the fact that my 8 a.m. class leads into a 10 a.m. class, which leads into a 12 p.m. class, which on Tuesdays leads into a 3 p.m. discussion, which leads into a 6 p.m. discussion.
Oh, buddy, you have a full day.
Yeah, so my Tuesdays are basically, and I hope to God that they're not mandatory, the discussion sections, because they're not anything basically. But unfortunately, it's not looking to be the case. I think I'm just gonna have the full day, just an 8 to 8 12-hour day. But it's okay. It's okay. Well, it's just one quarter. I just have to make it through like 10 weeks.
Okay.
So if I'm not alive really during the next like 2 or 3 months, that's why.
It's only on Tuesdays, right?
Only on Tuesdays. My Thursdays are 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. always. So that is at least manageable.
There you go.
It's just when you add the like extra bits to it that you're just like,
kind of chips away at you.
Yeah. And then it's like the thing about discussion sections is that, they're there to make sure that bigger classes can have smaller sized class experiences, which is fine, but like all literature courses are basically run like seminars anyway. Mm-hmm. So like there's no point because you're just kind of doing the same thing again. And I mean, I guess I shouldn't say that there's no point, but it's like I just don't feel the need for this necessarily. It doesn't provide any more value to me. And as a result, I just kind of sit in discussions and let other people talk, and then I just kind of take notes and maybe zone out sometimes. But yeah, that's my life. That's everything that's happened in my life. We've been talking for like an hour because well, not quite an hour, but we've been talking for a very long time because, it's been a long time since we've caught up, and there's a lot that happened. So, why don't we talk about anime? Honestly, like
anime.
Boy, at this point, like the amount that we've talked about our lives over the past couple weeks, it could just be its own episode. But we can't do that because of scheduling. which is super fun, and I love it. By which I mean I hate it.
It's fine.
But
we can do it.
It's fine.
Power
it's fine.
through.
Winnable.
Yeah.
So let's talk about anime. Let's start this easy because we're gonna be talking about Skullface Bookseller Honda-san or Gaikotsu Shotenin Honda-san.
You said that so American.
Gaikotsu Shotenin Honda Civic-san. This show is basically exactly what it was from the packaging. Like, we watched a couple episodes of it, and okay, I think part of this is because we did the fall start sampler episode in like the middle of the season, and we're trying to not repeat that for the winter season. But like, yeah, we've seen a good amount of this, and then like what we've said about it still stands. It's really funny. It's very real. It is a very self-aware show. And yeah, like, I think if you want like a short form comedy show that is a little bit real and is very Agretsuko, if that's what you're into, this is a show to watch.
Yeah, the humor gets me in basically every episode. like if he's screaming, I'm screaming.
it's like because the main character just screams a lot, except I understand because that's also how I feel, but like this show gets to externalize it.
Yeah, exactly. And if you've ever worked any kind of retail job, any kind, it doesn't matter if it's like in food, in clothing, whatever, you can relate to this guy.
Yeah. It's, you know what, I will say it's like it's very charming in the way that all of the characters have like these weird faces.
Yes,
and
I love that.
The people that don't are like literally nothing, or their customers. You know, it's funny because it almost makes the booksellers into like not real people, which is like I think hilarious, and completely the point.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm very into it, and I love it. It is a show with a lot of personality to it, and I highly recommend watching it. It's so low like investment too. Like, you don't need to watch all of it. You can just kind of take it at your own pace, and they're only like 10 minutes long. It's like 2 bits per episode. Yeah, I'm very into it, and if you want a relatable adult comedy, this is it.
It's good. It's light and nice.
Yeah.
So next we have That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. Tensei shitara suraimu datta ken.
Nice. Suraimu.
And it's an isekai, and according to Soup, the gold standard of isekai. And it's exactly what you get from the title. It's about salaryman who gets reincarnated as a slime, as we mentioned in the start, and it follows a pretty consistent plot line. It doesn't really like go too crazy in terms of like, you know, subverting all of your expectations, because they kind of get that out of the way in the beginning in terms of like, dude came over into fantasy world, but now he's a slime, so what do? But he's an overpowered slime.
See, the thing is, I feel like the slime isekai sort of franchise at this point, because you know it is a franchise, is the gold standard because it set a lot of these standards, at least for modern isekai as it is, because it's like, you know, it's taking the kind of wish fulfillment aspect of Sword Art Online and then mixing it with some of the more traditional fantasy elements of, I mean, like an RPG world, really, without explicitly saying it. Like, it's very much, this is, if you're like, what is an isekai? This is an isekai, right?
Yeah.
Like, the only thing that's slightly different about it is the fact that he's a slime, and that's kind of it, right? Like, it's isekai played very straight, which is, I think, fine, because we don't have a lot of anime that are actually like that. Like I've said, for some reason, we got the like reverse isekais first. Like, we got the like kind of subversive ones first, like Konosuba and Overlord and ReZero, without getting the actual
isekais that inspired and prompted those isekais to be made. I will say I think that Slime, the reason it actually lands really well is because it's very it is very consistent, but it's also very like kind of, I almost want to say honest in like its emotionality. Like it's kind of sentimental. Like actually no, it's very sentimental.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I love how they characterize all of the NPC characters. You know, they're all pretty unique and they characterize races that you don't normally, you know, get to relate to, like the lizard men and stuff like that. Like I love that.
Right. Yeah, I'm surprised that Remonster hasn't. I think that's what it's called. Remonster hasn't been turned into an anime, because that's another one that is very similar to this one. Like they pretty much have identical premises.
Okay.
But yeah, it is interesting because I feel like goblins are a somewhat a more sympathetic race in as treated in Japanese anime. I mean, aside from Goblin Slayer, but like,
I mean,
you know, that's a whole other thing.
There's 2 poles.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I will say it's like there are some moments in Slime that stand out as being really good. Like there are some moments that are, despite the fact that they're like kind of almost cheesy and sentimental, it plays them so straight that it kind of feels like genuine. You know, there's that moment where Rimuru is showing Shizu what like modern day Japan looks like, and like obviously this is like a very sort of idealistic idea, but it's true that the current image of Japan as like I'm not gonna say thriving, but like a powerful and successful nation is a far cry from, you know, the war torn, like, you know, wartime World War Japan that Shizu grew up with, right? Like it's interesting to me this idea of isekai where like the characters, like there's more than one person that comes from another world, and then they come at different times and their sort of experiences are affected by that. Yeah, I think that's very interesting, and I think Slime does it pretty well, because that moment is like cheesy, but it's also very honest, and it almost feels like, you know, like it almost feels hopeful in a way, where it's just like, you know, this it's not gonna be the worst forever, right?
Yeah.
It might get better, and it did. So yeah, I thought that moment was really good, and I think that the moments of characterization for the because in the latest episode, that's like the Orc Lord episode, that one was also done really well. And I remember that being pretty good from the manga, but it's actually better in the anime.
Oh.
But yeah, it is a very kind of like straightforward sentimentality that I like. I mean, I don't hate it, is the thing, right? It's like it's because
it's fine, yeah.
Yeah, it just is played so straight that I'm like, you know, I'm inured to it. I kind of I'm charmed by it.
Yeah, there's a certain genuineness that comes across that isn't seen as lazy, right? Because it works toward that, right? And it builds toward this expression of emotions when you finally get to that conflict of like the conflict resolution, right? And I feel like not every story or not every series needs like really convoluted, multi-layered emotional development or expression or whatever. Like sometimes you can play it straight and have it work just as well.
Yeah, I mean, I will say it's like it is very straightforward escapist fiction, and I'm kind of okay with that, because that's what isekai is.
Yeah,
and that's why I think this is the gold standard, because it just plays it so well. And even when like I think this show does the sort of like, you know, we must fight for a reason thing sort of well, because I mean, one, it's not like necessarily the central theme of the show. It's like there's a lot of other stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the reason that the like orc like lord arc ends so well is because it's just like, well, yeah, you know, this person was obviously driven to do bad things by their circumstances, and we're going to acknowledge that, but we also have to acknowledge the fact that, you know, we have to kind of like we can't let this continue, right? It's just like not good. So yeah, I think that it's good. Like I feel like it's good. Also, the animation is like surprisingly competent all the way through. I kind of felt like they would slack in the middle, but they didn't. Like it was very consistent throughout, which I was very surprised about. Yeah. I think this is done by Studio Mappa, right?
I believe so.
Oh, this is done by a different studio. This is done by Studio 8-Bit. Oh,
they did How to Keep a Mummy.
Yeah. So this studio did How to Keep a Mummy. They've kind of done all of the like sort of B or C tier stuff that we've been watching.
Yeah, they
like they did Knights and Magic and Shonen Maid.
Stuff. Yeah.
And they did the Grisaya sort of series. Yeah, interesting. None of these are really as good as Slime is.
That's
but
exactly
a lot of these
thinking.
a lot of these are adaptations, so I don't necessarily blame them. But that's very interesting.
That's a good one.
Yeah, they're like what do you call like an anime thing, like a discography?
Oh, they freaking did Knights and Magic. I hated that series.
I just said they did Knights and Magic.
Sorry, I just read it and
Oh, this is interesting. They animated a hentai in 2001.
There you go. You gotta go.
There you go.
Places, man.
Listen, if the person who drew hentai can do Shokugeki no Soma, anyone can do anything. If you draw porn, you can draw real life or anime, I guess. Yeah, that's interesting. They did a very good job. I'm like highly surprised because I was
it is really well animated.
Sincerely expecting it to not look very good, and it actually looks good. You know what? This is also weird because it's another anime, or I shouldn't say another anime. This is an anime that looks better when it's moving too. Yeah, I feel like the still shots of it don't really do it justice. It looks a lot better in motion.
I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it is about a slime, and seeing the slime bounce around is a lot of fun.
That's true. The slime physics are excellent.
Excellent.
lots of good slime movements. Yeah, just like the boing, bounce.
Yeah.
They give a lot of character to the slime, which is like a featureless blob too, which is nice.
It's wonderful.
So yeah, if you want a good isekai, or if you want to know what the heck an isekai is, if you didn't know, it means another world, and refers to series where the main character is transported into another world, usually a fantasy one. That's the way we think of it in kind of modern, sort of 2018, 2019 conception of it. But it has an illustrious history that dates back a long time, and you know, it doesn't have to be a fantasy world. Like No Game No Life is an isekai, but it's not a fantasy isekai. And I'm gonna go ahead and say this: Alice in Wonderland is an isekai. That's right. Come at me. Listen, you cannot prove that I'm wrong because I'm right.
I mean, yeah.
But yeah, if you just want something like really straightforward, very kind of fun action, comedy, all that sort of stuff. Like if you want to see what, you know, Japanese fantasy is all about, this is pretty indicative of a lot of it. So there you go.
There you go.
Let's talk about my favorite thing that aired this season. Zombieland Saga.
I
I love Zombieland Saga.
It was great. And it was great all the way through.
Yes. Okay. So here's the thing about Zombieland Saga is that you have a lot of questions that come up when you watch Zombieland Saga, and then they like kind of have these points of intrigue where you're like, oh, I have more questions. And then they don't answer any of them, and I kind of love it. I'm not gonna lie. I was a little bit like, but then I realized I don't really care. I had so much fun watching this show that everything else like just didn't matter, right? Like this show is like it has so much heart to it, and like that. I mean, that's a thing that I've said over and over again. But like, it's so good. Like, it's so like weird and unique and lovely, and like all of the characters are treated so seriously, and also like but at the same time the like gags land really well. I'm gonna be surprised. Like, I'm gonna be honest. Like, I was so surprised at how much I ended up liking Zombieland Saga.
Me too.
Because I wasn't expecting to like it at all. Right?
Me too.
I saw the poster for it and I was like, oh, this looks kind of interesting, maybe a little edgy. And I, went into it with like, this might be pretty like meh, mediocre. And I was like immediately caught off guard at how good it is. Right? I was like, oh, this is one of the anime that we're gonna finish this season. Like at that very moment when we watched the first episode, I was like, oh, yeah. And then when the second episode rolled around, like obviously I've talked about this, but like the rap scene comes around and I'm like, okay. All right, okay. Zombieland Saga, I guess you got your hooks in me. But yeah, I was genuinely surprised at how much I cared about all the characters at the end and how distinct they are, and just how good the kind of weird meta layer about all this is done. It's kind of like there's the idols and they all come from different generations. And it's very interesting to me that like they chose to use Yugiri, who is an Oiran, as an example of an idol, because I mean, yeah, that makes sense, actually, right? But it's like so far removed from what we would think of traditionally as an idol, because even some of the other idols in the group are like, oh, this is an idol from like the 80s, and the conception of being an idol back then was much different, right? And I like that it kind of respects that. It says like, you don't have to meet them. And I think I said this in the like year-end wrap-up. But yeah, that all that stuff is like really, really well done. And I love the fact that it's like also genuine advertisement for like Saga, the like place in Japan. Like that chicken place is real. And I love the weird meta layer of they shot a commercial for a real place in an anime, and then they have the commercial air in the anime.
I think it's great. I love that it's about the revival of Saga, and you as an outside audience, you don't know like what is Saga, and then you learn it's a place, and it's like, okay, and then it's like a real place. It's like, oh, yeah, I thought you were making all this up.
No, it's like a real place, and like all of the stuff they're doing is like real Saga stuff, and then you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. And so basically, Zombieland Saga is the perfect advertisement because it has reached people that would obviously never know what this place was even a little bit. And now there's probably going to be like a tourist bump in Saga, which is pretty cool. But I love the fact that it's like there's this like a very odd conceit and they just roll with it. Like they just don't care. They're like, I bet you have questions, but it just doesn't matter.
Yeah,
and
it stays on track throughout the whole season.
And you know what? Like that's good. Like they did it really well. And I like the fact that they don't care enough to give us answers, because it tells us that that's not the point, and that the things that really matter are what we found along the way. And like this is like so funny. Like it's literally an anime where it's like, well, maybe the real like experience was the friends we made along the way, because
I mean, it is. Yeah.
you stop caring about like
Yeah.
you know the like the like backstory of these girls, and maybe there's going to be some intrigue about the fact that they were people who were alive. No, there's not. They're just genuinely idols, and like it's like this huge bait and switch where by the time you get to that point, you are already heavily invested in the fact that these girls are idols, and you want them to do well because they're all so charming and funny and weird. And the level at which it is like playing this game is like way beyond my like conception of it, where I'm just like, whoa, my mind is blown at how much I care about all this stuff now. You know, it's like it acknowledges that there is a lot of stuff that is not ideal about the idol industry. You know, it's kind of like there's obviously the point about they're zombies, so they never stop working, and they're like always on that grind, and you know, they're not even treated like people, right? And these are all very valid points to make about the idol industry, but you know, it does go back and say like, you know, these girls are doing it because they love it. And I mean, again, it's like it's so heartfelt and lovely in the way that it completely tackles the like this like sort of negativity about it, and focuses on the positive aspects of it without disregarding the negative aspects, right? It's like that is so good to me. And boy, thanks Cygames for my life, I guess, because this is a Cygames produced anime, which is hilarious because Cygames is producing anime now, and and you know what? I just realized Cygames keeps doing this idol stuff. You know what? Because they did Uma Musume.
Yes.
And now they did Zombieland Saga. So basically, Cygames' like sort of end game is to make sure that all of their gacha games do well on the backs of idols, and also the fact that you're crying over them because they're well written characters. But yeah, I was genuinely shocked at how much I legitimately loved Zombieland Saga. It's like from now on, it will be one of my favorite anime. Just like of all time.
I like that they didn't answer all the questions too, because I think that leaves room for season 2 should they choose to do so. Right? There's enough intrigue there.
I do think that's part of it, right? Is that it is open to a second season.
Yeah.
If they so wish, but even if there isn't, it still ends in a satisfying way. Like
exactly. Yep.
The sort of like tease about like the fact that someone's onto their identities as like people is kind of funny to me, because it just comes after the end. It's like so nothing, right? Because it's the real conclusion of it is when they actually get up and they do the performance, and you know, you actually legitimately care about it. You're like, please, like, go. You become a fan in that moment. You know, you become one of the people in the audience, and you're just like, do it. Even though it's like they're still doing that weird like CG dance, you're just like, just do it. Go do that CG dance, girls. You can do it. I believe in you. And I don't know how much of the CG is done like ironically, but at this point, I don't really care. Like, it's to the point where I don't care that they've started that they used like CG for the dance scenes. I was like, oh yeah, you could do it. I was too busy being emotional about it. Yeah, I was, man. Oh boy. And let's like wrap around to it. Like Zombieland Saga does a trans character, a trans like idol, and a trans idol main character, quote unquote, just part of an ensemble cast. But wow, like I've never seen a trans character done well in a show that's not specifically about like LGBTQ stuff, right? Like,
yeah, I like that they had the focus just on like one episode. And I'm not saying like in order to minimize it, but I'm saying like because that's the way that the show progressed. Usually each of the cast had one episode where you explored a bit of their backstory or what their current conflict is and how they ended up in the group. And so they did that for this character, Lily. And after it was acknowledged and, you know, her backstory was, you know, presented to the group, etc., they went back to their regular shenanigans right afterward, right? During the next episodes, they went on to exploring other characters. And I like that the group dynamic didn't really change, even though you would expect something like that to be contentious, right? But that's not the point of the show, and that's not really what the story that they're trying to tell. They're trying to tell the story of how this idol group, you know, revives Saiga or whatever, right?
Yeah.
and comes together at the end. And then I like that at the end they wrap around to the main character's arc, and then that is what really like solidifies the bond between the group and what they've been through. So I think that the treatment of this character was really well done because it wasn't overly focused and it wasn't under focused. It was just like that right amount of balance.
I mean, like the reason that this is like it works is because, again, it is something that is like legitimately the focus of her. It is like very deeply tied to her identity as like an idol, and it's like very important to her character. But it's not like the only thing that her character is
exactly
about, right?
Yes.
And the fact that we're getting more genre stuff with, you know, incidentally queer characters. I mean, Banana Fish was written in like the 80s, but like, you know, right? It's like, how far have we really come? Like the fact that we are getting like genre stuff with incidentally queer characters is really great, right? Like,
yeah.
And boy, the fact that they like the narrative and the characters treat the character really well.
Yes.
And they like it's just handled so like it's very sensitive, right? Like it's not like played for jokes, it's not played for like ridicule or it's not like super dramatic either, right? Because like the actual central focus is about their relationship or her relationship with her dad and the way that was frayed by show business and
exactly
by
the focus
right?
was about what was more important to her, which was her relationship with her dad and the idol and her becoming an idol rather than her being trans, right? Of course that's going to be important, but that's not the message, right?
But also the fact that like she literally dies because she realizes that she's going through puberty is like,
yes,
boy, yeah, that's like like the fact that like all of these kinds of I have to wonder, right? Like I have to wonder who wrote this character and if they did any like sensitivity like reading or anything, because I've never seen a character done like this it
just seems so
anime.
Naturally approached, you know?
Right.
Like whoever did this might be like if they know anyone that's, you know, LGBTQ or whatever, then they just see them like, you know, as like, everyday people. Like it's nothing, you know, to
the thing is I don't expect this level of representation, right? From anyone really, but like even sort of more progressive circles, right? It can be a very contemptuous point. Like I think it's very easy to not do this kind of character well. Like I think it's really easy for people to have good intentions and then just like, I don't know, whatever, they don't pay for sensitivity reading or they don't ask anybody who's actually trans like what it's like, and they end up in a situation where it's like it almost does more harm than good, right? And the fact that this show does it so well, so almost incidentally, right? Where it's just like all of these themes about her character, like very tightly wrap around each other and like create something that's like much greater than like it's so interesting that this came out of an anime, which is like I'm not gonna lie, this isn't me saying like, oh, Japan is a terrible place where gays are not allowed. I mean, to be fair, it's like not legal to marry if you're gay there. Like let's be fair.
Let's be real.
Like let's be real here. But that's not to say that there isn't like a thriving LGBTQ community in Japan. But it is to say that anime is notorious
for being very, 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 very bad with trans characters because
yes. Awful.
Right, because it does it like anime as a whole, right, as a community has this problem where they're just like, oh, traps, bro. And even saying that makes me want to vomit.
Yeah.
But like this is the reason why it's so surprising to me that this character is done like this in a way that is okay. And this is like the most important part, right? Like this isn't like bullshit subtext Japan. This is like explicitly like this is a trans character, right?
Right.
About as well as you can do that without just screaming like I'm a trans character, like just like straight out of someone's mouth.
Yeah.
Like it could not possibly be more explicit than this. Basically, is what I'm saying. Like I don't know. I'm kind of in shock, right? Like if you're like me and you've like been watching anime for a while, this is like weird.
Yeah, it's unprecedented, you know.
It is. This is unprecedented. Yeah. Like
yeah. Well, it makes me hopeful that that stories from that we're heading in that direction, right? Where we aren't tiptoeing around the issue like we're on thin ice or anything, because you can see that coming from a while away too, or that we're burying it in subtext, or we're like deep diving too hard into it, right? It's just like just the right amount of treatment that you feel like the representation is there and you feel like you're doing the character justice, that their character isn't just about being trans or, part of the LGBTQ community, that this is a person, right? And you're focusing on their story as a person. And it tells me that whoever wrote this is a storyteller and they know what to focus on.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, generally speaking, like doing a trans character well is just the same as doing other characters well.
Exactly.
Insofar as like writing a character is
right. And
like
sometimes you hear about people like asking authors like, oh, how did you do these female characters so well? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, and generally their answer is, I wrote them as a human being. I just wrote people, them as a person.
And people just kind of suck. So, there's your lesson for the day. All
people suck.
Everyone sucks. Yeah, I mean, it was done so genuinely well that like I couldn't not like it, and then like I fell in love with the show like just like that. It was like, it was icing on the cake basically, and
yeah.
I hope we get more shows like this. I mean, I genuinely do. Where did this come from?
From Cygames Heart.
Thanks, Cygames, for my
life.
Thanks,
Cygames.
Okay.
All right. So next we have ssss.gridman.
Yes, Gridman.
From Studio Trigger, and thank God we got this freaking anime, because if I got another freaking Daddy Fuda darling in the
if we got another bad Trigger anime, I would just hang up my hat and leave.
But yeah, this was excellent. It was surprisingly excellent. I love the animation, of course, because Trigger, but it wasn't like overdone, like, bombastic Trigger, which of course is aesthetic too. But this was like just the right amount of animation for these characters that are, for the most part, they're just like going to school and stuff. But then there's kaiju battles. And I love the way that they treat the CG in terms of like, it's definitely intentionally not their best CG work, and then they intentionally leave it looking different than what's going on in the rest of the world.
Yes.
And I love that because it's very like nostalgic feeling, like
so
rather than like rubber suited kaiju, we get like oddly CG'd.
Well, so that's the thing about the kaiju though, right? Is that all of the kaiju were designed in such a way that there could just be a guy in a rubber suit. Like there could be a guy in that rubber suit, right?
Yes.
I also agree that I ended up really unexpectedly loving Gridman. And
Yes.
it wasn't until the second act of the show that I really fell in love with it. Like, because I like Monster of the Week stuff, but I can understand that it gets understandably kind of boring to some people, because it's like, oh, they're just doing the same thing every week, right? So I think Gridman strikes a really good balance between the Monster of the Week stuff at the beginning and then leading into a more sort of fluid story at the end. And yeah, I completely agree. And okay, by the way, we've mentioned before, this is not a spoiler-friendly podcast, so I'm just going to spoil the shit out of this. The fact that the twist at the end is that it's just all like a game sort of simulation thing, that was what got me. I was like, oh my god, right? Like the fact that that's the reason why the CG is used for like the monsters and for Gridman. And I mean, even the CG looks pretty okay, honestly. It like is purposefully very clunky, but not in a way that is like unappealing to look at.
Yeah.
And also, like, the reason I say this is because you can really see this in the like last couple of episodes, because they start to break some of those rules, right? Like, these characters who are in CG are moving a lot more fluidly, and like you can see it in the kaiju that is created from Akane's heart, where it's like it moves really fast and like really weirdly, and you're really like kind of put off by it because it's like too real almost in its movements, but in a way that's like kind of scary, right? It's unsettling to look at because it moves somewhat realistically, which is it's like right there in the middle of the uncanny valley. It's very well done. And I loved it, right? Because it combines a lot of the things that I really like, you know, I kind of like this over the top bombastic tokusatsu sort of Monster of the Week story where it's like, oh, Gridman's gonna fight a big monster, yay. And then but here's the thing, I also love when it really digs into the implications of the world and the themes of the show later, where they're like Akane's whole deal where she's like the god of this world and she's created everything, and you know, it's just a dream that she's having, essentially, that she has to wake up from, in a sense, right? I mean, I love all of that, right? Like, it ended up being a very like touching metaphor, like an allegory for, you know, being ostracized and alone and hurting people and being hurt. You know, it's very, okay, I will say it's very Ava. Like, the ending goes full Ava. You know, complete with gay hand-holding.
It is it's got them strong Ava parallels, and I loved it. And they build up to it too in an appropriate way.
They build up to it really well. This is easily the best anime Trigger has done. That's a big statement, sir.
I mean, like,
like, I wouldn't say easily. I think Kill la Kill is still pretty good. All things considered.
There's still others that I'm like,
still pretty good. But yeah, like, I will say that this is like a really well done anime because I think because of its like the scope of it, like the framing of it, it's kind of explicitly a very meta show because it has a lot more like kind of cinematic framing than a lot of anime. It's not framed necessarily like an anime. There's a lot of like the shot where the like characters, the like Gridman characters are like running, and then the like Auntie and the kaiju like reruns are fighting, right? That's a really, really well shot scene, quote unquote shot, right?
Yeah.
So, and like the writing is also really good. Like the way that they implement the writing and the time that they spend explaining the world is like very subtle, or not subtle necessarily, but it's not over the top, right?
Yes, exactly.
There's a lot of showing, and especially between characters, and I will say this, especially between Auntie and Akane, where because Akane is like a real person, like that's the kind of the conceit of the show, like she's a real human being from our world, right? It's kind of like that conversation between Auntie and Akane where he like tries to hand her the umbrella and she's just like no, right?
Yes.
That scene is so good. And you get all of the emotion in that scene without anyone saying anything about that, right? They're just like, oh, I can see it in your eyes or whatever, right? They don't say like, oh, you look so terrible, or like, I'm so sad. It's like, it's the feeling of like, leave me alone, I don't want to talk to you, without ever explicitly necessarily saying that is so good.
Yeah, like they do such a good job with like body language, like especially between those two. Like you see her complete dismissal of him. Like most of the time she isn't even looking at him when she's talking to him, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
it's great.
I also love the fact that it essentially like shifts from the monster of the week thing to like quote unquote modern storytelling conventions. Like it goes from, this is a straightforward show about a boy who turns into a giant robot to fight monsters, to like, oh, by the way, this is like all a virtual reality dream by a person who is feeling like lonely and like depressed, right? It's like, oh yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And it makes that shift really, really well, too.
Exactly. Like, it's not one of those, like, haha, plot twist moments. It's more of like by that point, they've explained that Akane made this world, but it's become too big for her, and that just, like, ruins her, right? And you kind of get the sense that this is something that she's feared, like, all this time, and you're like, why? This is more deep-seated than that, right? And then when the final reveal happens, like, she's a real person who secluded herself into her room, you're like, that's why. This was supposed to be her escape.
Yeah.
And because the world is too big for her and she doesn't know how to deal with that.
Yeah, that was why I loved the first or like the last scenes in the anime where they're like talking in the room and where she's like she's crying in the room too, like where she's like God, that was the moment where I was like, oh, this is like real, like and the fact that they reveal that and they never say it, right? Like, oh my God, they never say it, which is so good, but you know it.
Yeah, exactly. You know it. And I love the fact that it's basically like this whole world is like full of her imaginary friends, right? And so
exactly.
It makes sense that she never felt any comfort whenever they're like, oh, where are your friends, blah, blah, blah. And why she couldn't believe them until the very, very end when they were having the talk and Rika was like, I just want you to, carry me in your heart, and, I'm not going to be able to go to whatever world that gods go to, but I just hope you'll carry me with you. And that's why she gives her the passport.
Yeah, I mean, what's so interesting about that to me, though, is that there's like a couple of really key moments that stand out to me, which is that in the last scene where they're like where she's like where they're talking about, it's like, why was it Yuta that carries Gridman or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And you have that scene where everyone is talking to or looking at Akane except for Yuta, who is looking at Rika. And so you have this like level where, Yuta is like the only one who can save Akane, because in a world where everyone is made to like Akane and like love Akane, he chooses to like Rika instead. And I think to the point, it almost feels like to me that Rika is like also part of Akane, because when she wakes up in the real life, like she looks like Rika. And that would make a lot of sense for the way that the show is framed, because it's like, okay, so if you're gonna carry me with you, right? Probably really what that means is like Rika was really Akane to begin with, right? Like they were kind of the same. They were kind of the same person, and that Akane was actually just like a projection. And the way that it's done at the end, where, you know, it's like, oh, fighting isn't my only strength, I, Gridman, can fix things, was really cool. Like, I mean, I feel like this is a very sappy episode that we've done here, but like, it's like, it cannot be understated how important it is that this is a show that at the end of the day is about, you know, a hurt girl who cannot handle the world. And it is about the process of her healing. And it's all like allegorized through, or allegoried. I don't know what the actual like word for that is. Like, I don't know how to turn that into a verb. But it becomes an allegory through the use of like tokusatsu. And, you know, you kind of get hints of this, right? Like where Akane is someone who creates kaiju, who is a kaiju, who aligns herself with kaiju and likes kaiju. Like, she actually knows things about kaiju, right? And we learn that in the middle of the series, right? Well, I mean, there's a very like big social weight that comes with that, where it's like, you know, you are identifying yourself with the villains of the show, right? You're identifying yourself in opposition to the heroes, you know, because a lot of people feel that way. And this is like something that is mirrored in One Punch Man, like what's his name, like Garo is like this, where he's like, I always wish the villains could have won, I'll become the best villain you'll ever see. And he's not like, I don't know if he's evil necessarily, like that's not a good word for it, but he still becomes an antagonist, right? It's like,
right.
And I love that Akane is like the antagonist, but also the like real main character of the show. Like we get the show through Yuta's perspective, but it's really about Akane. And the way that turnaround is executed is very well done. And the fact that like the scene where, you know, Yuta is like looking at Rika and not at Akane is like, they don't say anything. They just show that to us and expect us to like know it. And I'm like, I'm just so proud. You know what I mean? I feel like a proud parent who's just like, you did it. You did it, son. I genuinely loved this anime. Like I wasn't expecting to, even like halfway through, because I was like, oh, this is a cool anime. Too. You know, I'm it's been a while since I've watched like a tokusatsu thing or whatever. And then it does this, and I'm like, oh yeah, I love this. I mean, it to me feels a lot more Gainax than Darling in the Franxx ever did, which is funny, all things considered, right? Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
This was the anime that I think Trigger needed after Franxx, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like, yeah. You know what? It's because the reason that I say this is because it feels very Eva, but it actually feels a lot more furikuri. It feels very furikuri at the end. And the reason I say that is because, you know, you have I don't remember her name, but like Fire Girl, who keeps playing that game where she's like God and she like sets fires, and that feels a lot like Akane. And you know, it's also like an allegory for like puberty and growing up and being a person in a society, right? All those things that are painful and terrible. And yeah, I'm legitimately blown away at how like sophisticated, I guess I would say, the actual writing for Gridman was, because it's like this is like a remake of like a 90s tokusatsu show. It is. Oh,
I love the nostalgic look of the final Gridman.
Oh, the final Gridman was so good. I was like, that is a guy in a rubber suit, and I love it.
Yes.
Like he looks so like janky 80s, and I'm so about it.
So I love that, like, in addition to the great storytelling, it hits all of the traditional notes of a tokusatsu.
Yes, yes, it absolutely
It feels
does.
like, yeah, it has a really good understanding of that genre, and they know how to hit the right notes and to showcase what they need to showcase that really makes it a tokusatsu.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
They even have the whole, like, the villain comes over and becomes part of your one of your allies. Oh, I loved it.
Oh my god, yes, that turnaround was so good. Just like, I live to destroy you, but that means you must live.
Yes.
I was like, yes. Oh, I love this. And then, like, the fact that they played like the like really old, I think that is the original Gridman theme. But
it has to be, right?
It has to be, because it was so 80s. And like, the fact that they played it, I was like, oh, I am very about this.
Yes.
Yeah, everything that Gridman does, it feels like it comes from a place of love.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's so carefully crafted. And I fell in love with Gridman harder than I thought I would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a great anime in general, and it's great for the age group that they're showcasing, right? Because it's basically like, hey kids, we know you like anime, we know you like kaijus and stuff, but treat your friends well.
Yeah, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like a whole like story that we can infer from the show, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and like wholeheartedly recommend Zombieland Saga and Gridman. Just watch them. Like just watch them. That's my recommendation. Just watch them.
Yeah, give them a try. See if you like them. Zombieland Saga is pretty like you get what you're getting into from the get go. Like both of them are, but they dive into it more deeply than you think in each of their own genres, and I think it's stunning the way that they do so.
Also, the fights in Gridman get really cool.
At the end, oh my god,
at the end, they get really cool.
Like they progress.
Yeah, I mean, what's funny to me is that they kind of tackle this idea of like tokusatsu and like kaiju battles, right? Where they're just like, with the Yuta's friend Utsumi, where he's like, so many people got hurt during that, but like I thought it was so cool when Gridman was fighting the monsters, and then they're just like, I mean, yeah, right? Like that's us.
I know.
Like it's so awful, but we're just like, Gridman, fuck him up, destroy that monster. Hey. But yeah, it is. I did not expect to like it as much as I did.
Yeah.
And I wholeheartedly recommend it. And I think Gridman is like one of those things where you have to kind of, if you're not into the premise of it, you kind of have to watch. Like you just have to keep grinding it out, basically, because it does pay off in the end, at least in my opinion.
I think so too.
Yeah. So let's. Well, actually, I'm gonna talk about Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai, because it is very much in the same vein, except not quite as like allegorical. It is a lot more straightforward because it externalizes a lot of the same anxieties and feelings as Gridman does. It executes all its arcs really solidly even until the end, which is surprisingly hard. It's very hard to write very consistently, but it ends about as well as it begins, which is nice. And I just there's like one thing, which is that it kind of feels like Oregairu in the fact that it feels like there's more story in the light novel, or that it continues on afterwards, which is, I mean, that's fine. I think it works well enough as a singular piece, as like a 12 episode piece. But I love the fact that Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai has and like it's such a like sharp way of looking at like adolescence. Like the fact that so adolescent syndrome is like this manifestation of like the stuff that it's like societal stuff, but in the kind of microcosm of school, right, and like your peers, and then it manifests physically as like problems, I guess you'd say.
So for example, Bunny Girl Senpai, her adolescent syndrome manifests in that people stop being able to perceive her,
Right.
because she gets actively ignored by the people around her to the point that they basically stop, acknowledging her existence entirely. And she literally starts to not exist in people's memories and whatnot, like even people who should know her. And they have a couple of different examples of that, and I think the way that they explore it is really cool. And because the show is divided into different arcs, they don't overstay their welcome, right? I only got through like the first arc, unfortunately, which is the first 3 episodes.
Okay.
But my God, those episodes flew by, and they were so, not in the terms of like, oh, it's so fast paced, but it was actually perfectly paced to the point that I was just like, okay, first episode, and then we watched right into the second episode, and it's like, okay, third episode, and I was like, that was beautiful.
I know. Yeah, it works really well, even though they're like they're very tightly written, I would say, because it's like the arcs take place over 2 or 3 episodes.
Yeah.
Which is not a long time.
No.
But they managed to develop characters and then have an emotional payoff in that amount of time. And it's not going to be, I will say, it's not going to be as great as like something like A Place Further Than the Universe, but it is still going to be there. And like, there's stuff at the end that is also really impactful and very emotional and built up to very well. One thing that I love about this show is that the adults do not believe in adolescent syndrome.
Yeah.
Like I love that they just don't get it, right?
Yeah.
Like there's
just the one reporter lady, and then that's it.
Right.
No one else.
Like I love it because it's not only like, good writing, right? Because it's just like, oh, the adults can't help you out of this one, right?
Yeah.
But it's also like good like empathy building, and it shows you the perspective of what it's like to be an adolescent, because these things are happening, they're manifesting, you can see them happening with your eyes, but people will, like, adults do not believe you, they just don't see it. And that's such a great way of like looking at how people are treated as adolescents.
Yeah, like literally, what do you do when the person you see very clearly and know is disappearing, and you try and go to her mom about it, and the mom cannot help.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And there's some other stuff at the end that I really like. Like there's a twist where well, I won't spoil it for you because you'll have to watch it.
Don't spoil it for me. I'm gonna watch it.
You're gonna watch it. I assume you're gonna watch it eventually.
Yes, I will. I love this anime.
But yeah, all of the characters that have adolescent syndrome are really well done, and then the ending I think wraps it up well enough that it can stand alone. So
okay,
yeah, and it legitimately feels like it feels like a natural conclusion to what's happening. Like I can't say too much about it because I don't want to spoil it for you personally, but the last episode is very good.
Nice.
That's all I'll say.
That's what I like to hear.
Yeah,
I feel like from an animation standpoint, it was interesting. The whole, like, first of all, the advertising for the show, I'm still befuddled by it, right?
Yeah.
They clearly were leaning super hard on the bunny girl part of this show, even though from what I've watched, she only wears it for like maybe 1 episode top, right?
Right.
And yeah, were they doing it to bait people who would love that kind of thing into this show? In which case, they would probably stop watching after the first 2 episodes because they're like, "This isn't what I wanted." Or when is she going to put the suit on? And then you learn that she's never going to put it back on. Or because also simultaneously that advertising would push away people like me who didn't even give the show a chance in the beginning, right? Because like I was just like, okay, look at this, look at this cover, look at this title, summary sounds you know, and I didn't bother with it, right? And it turns out that this is exactly my kind of show. So
Yep.
yeah, I'm very confused by the advertising. I'm wondering if it was like a publisher idea, or maybe if it was, you know, the actual studio's idea. Maybe they did it on purpose, but
I think it's just kind of like that. Like, I think the writer just writes a bunch of these like sleeper light novels where it's like, oh, it baits you in with like a cute premise, and then you're like, oh my god, I have so many feelings. What is this? Reforming society?
I guess they're really hardcore targeting the people who would be in here for an ecchi anime, and then hooking them with like, oh, but I want these two people to be together, right?
Yeah.
And maybe trying to get them to think more deeply rather than attracting the deep thinking audience already, and maybe the deep thinking audience will come by along eventually. Like, I don't know.
I think they just expect people to like ride off of the goodwill of this author's last work, which was also pretty much like this, where it was like, oh, it starts out and it sounds kind of trashy, and then suddenly everyone is crying, including you. Yeah.
Okay. I understand that, I guess.
Yeah. Is there another one that you want to talk about? Well, who would I recommend this for? I recommend this if you like serious drama stories, and if you like character development, and if you just want to see some relationships happen.
I recommend it for people who actually want to see a relationship in which it doesn't feel like the two characters are being pushed together, right?
Yeah. It feels very natural.
Yeah, literally after my friends sat me down and we watched this, because they were like, you gotta watch this, and I was like, okay, well, man, I'm here, so watch it. We went to go watch Aquaman.
Oh no.
Which, first of all, from an animation standpoint, I love that movie because, like, my god, it was beautiful. From a relationship drama standpoint, it was exactly what you would expect out of a superhero movie, which is the two characters look at each other and they start falling in love.
Oh,
which,
Lord.
I mean, you know, love at first sight, yada yada yada, but it didn't feel like they built up to anything significant, but by the end they're kissing, you know, that kind of thing. Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai doesn't do that. Like, these characters are looking at each other all the time, and a lot of the time they're fighting or like giving each other crap, and it's great.
Yep.
Yeah, and yeah, so I love that. I'm very intrigued by the fact that the way that the animation looks makes it look like a much older anime. Like, not like 90s
the
anime.
style is very like kind of 2010.
It's early 2000s, right? And,
yeah, like early knots.
Yeah, like
it's
almost like
Haruhi.
Toradora or
it's very
like that.
Toradora.
Yeah, right. And I'm like, this has to be purposeful, right?
I think so. I think it's just like the style of the writing is also like that, is the thing.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you like Toradora, I think you're gonna like Bunny Girl. So
yeah, exactly. Maybe that's what they could have been going for too. But
I mean, I was gonna say, like, it is kind of the Toradora thing where they bait you in with one thing and they give you another thing, which is emotions.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, this looks like a cute, like, you know, anime that is kind of predictable, and then by the end you're like, oh, why do we just exist only to hurt each other? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved this show.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, this is the studio that I think they were, I mean, before they separated, right? They're Cloverworks now, but before they were part of A1 Pictures, and they were, you know, before this, they were working on Darling in the Franxx. So you imagine, like they had to have purposefully done this kind of story and this kind of animation style, because you know what they can do with that anime, and yet they did this. So yeah, I personally loved it. Like, I would highly recommend this to anyone who like actually likes to think about their anime rather than like sit and absorb, because there's those kinds of series too where it's just like, I just want to watch, you know, I don't want to think about nothing. And yeah, this is definitely my kind of anime.
All right, is there anything that you want to talk about before we sort of speed round the rest of this so that we're not here for like 3 hours?
No.
Okay, let's go with start with Run with the Wind.
Okay, Run with Wind is a lot of people like to compare it to Haikyuu because it looks just like a Haikyuu because it was done by the people who did Haikyuu, but it's a slower paced show. It's about long distance running and the characters are wonderful. We talked about this in the Starto, and it carries and builds throughout. It doesn't like left turn or anything. And when they actually start doing the racing bits and start trying to get like times and stuff so they can qualify for the big race, it's awesome. Like the pacing starts to pick up, you feel the competitive spirit and you want these boys to win. So I highly recommend this show. Even if you're not necessarily into sports anime, you might like this one because the characters are great.
Nice. Hinamaru Zumo, Thick Boys Wrestle. Opening is a bop, ending is a bop. Next.
Next is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind, and even though it's continuing, I wanted to mention it because I didn't mention it in the startup because I kind of forgot to, and I also didn't have an opinion about it then. But quick opinion is that the characters are quite different from the previous JoJo's. If you've watched them, you can jump into this one without having watched the others and be like, I want some JoJo weirdness, but I don't want to go through all of that. You can jump into this one and you'll get the same kind of feel for it. It's all about the battles. Is very battle focused, and they got some really strange powers going on, and the way that they interact is very, very cool. The writing for the battles feels so smart, and I'm really enjoying it so far.
Nice.
Also, the ending song, I hate it. I hate the ending song. I usually like the ending songs because they'll pick awesome ones. This one I hate. Anyway.
I feel like Araki picks these because he's like a weird like Western nerd.
It feels like it, and he has some good picks, but this one is just like all about sexuality, so it's very weird when you have a climactic, like,
That's
cliffhanger,
funny.
and then suddenly there's this dude singing about how he wants to frick down with a lady.
Nice. You know what? It do just be like that. All right, Banana Fish. It's gay crime drama. It's very good. I unfortunately have not finished it because I'm bad and I don't have time to do anything anymore.
But it's good.
But it's good. It's good. I will finish it. And that's saying something because, I don't finish anything that doesn't last the season, basically. Because I'm kind of the worst. So get back to me in like a month and I might have finished it by then. Next.
Yay. Next.
Karakuri Circus.
How about Karakukuri?
Karakukuri. Yeah, that
Karakukuri
circus, but with the knives.
This show is also continuing, but I wanted to mention that, Soup and I had stopped watching together around episode 3, and I continued on, and episode 4 is when it really gets down to it, y'all. You think that you know what this show is up with, like the first 3 episodes. You're like, a kid joins these 2 people, one of them's circus lady, one of them's a funny man. Oh my god, the episode 4 is like such a hot mess, but the end though, you're like, what? What just happened? Because I never read the manga 4. And so from there it goes super crazy. If you love super duper duper anime, just anime. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. That's all the stuff that you're like, wow, this could only happen in an anime. That's what Karakuri Circus is.
I feel like that sounds about right.
Yeah. So, I actually have been really enjoying it. I tend to enjoy more crazy shonen type anime that have some level of storytelling, so yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Goblin Slayer. It's basically D&D. Just skip the first episode. The CG never gets any better. It's just they just CG him when he's standing there. I don't know why.
No.
Next.
Next is Golden Kamuy second season. Bro, I don't know how they did this because the first season was already so good, but the story just gets better.
Yeah, man, I love Golden Kamuy.
Man, it's so good. And the CG in this also never gets any better. You would think that it would get better because it's the second season. It's the same.
No, it's okay. Who knows? Maybe season 3 will give us like really high quality bears, and we'll just be like, whoa.
I wasn't prepared for this. Yeah. Regardless,
It'll give us photographs of the bears,
I know they'll just be like
like
across.
real ass bears.
Yeah. So I really really love this series. I'm so in love with this series, and I really hope that there's a season 3.
I knew you would like
one.
it. I knew you would like it. I need to catch up because I need to get ready for season 3. All right.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much it. Somehow we've been okay. This season was so hard to wrap up because there were so many good anime.
Yeah.
In fact, there were more great anime in this one season than there have been in like certain years.
I mean, at least ones that appeal to us, right? Which we, of course, have. Very
I have
tastes,
very
but...
specific tastes, but
yeah.
I agree. But like, just generally, I feel like a ton of great stuff came out, not just in the last season, but like the last year.
Yeah.
There was so much good stuff. Like last year was so good.
Yeah, I feel like it began really strong, right? Because there were so many anime from winter that I really, really loved. And then it ended so strong too, because there's so many from this season that we weren't even able to keep up with, but we wanted to because we love them all.
I know. This is a first.
Yeah.
Usually if we drop something, it's because we just don't care enough. But no, it's like literally we don't have enough physical time in the day to fit this in.
Yeah.
Like Banana Fish. Oh, I need to finish Banana Fish.
Oh, Banana Fish.
All right. Yeah, I think that's it. We've managed to wrap everything up. Let's quickly give it our names and where we can find us so that we can skedaddle. You go.
I'm Renu. You could also call me Swan. I am on Twitch and Twitter and Tumblr at SwanDrawn. You can find me on Instagram at swan.drawn. This coming probably next 2 weeks, I will be finishing up Yakuza Kiwami 2. And at the end of the month, I will be in Kingdom Hearts Hell like everyone else that I know.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about Kingdom Hearts because I only played, I think, 358 over 2.
I think even if you did know anything about Kingdom Hearts, you would still just be as confused as me.
Do you know what? I think that's valid. I think that's incredibly valid.
There are so many videos on YouTube trying to explain the plot of Kingdom Hearts, and
yes,
it never gets easier to understand.
It's okay. Like Kingdom Hearts is one of those weird arcane series that has like 8,000 games, and you don't understand how any of it works. It's kind of like Nier. We're just like, Yoko Taro, what are you doing? He's just like, I don't know. Listen, I made a game, like 4 of them, 5, 6, I don't know, a bunch of them. This one has robots in it. And you're like, cool.
You're gonna play it, and you're gonna love it.
Like, sure. Sure.
Yeah, I can't wait because it's looking to be a beautiful game and fun, like all the other Kingdom Hearts. So, yeah, that's where you can find me.
Nice.
What about you?
You can find me all the places at Literal Soup. I am going to start school tomorrow as of the time of this recording, but also as of the time of this release, I will have school tomorrow. So it's still relevant, but I will be going to school, and this is my hell quarter, so I'm just gonna have to brave through it. I'm just gonna have to grind it out, get through it. And then, yeah, I will, other than that, I mean, really, I'm just going to do my best in school. Like, I'm just kind of going to shove off all my other responsibilities and not think about them.
I'm just gonna do my best.
I'll retreat from society. I won't talk to anybody for the next 10 or so weeks. But yeah, anyway, I bought a planner to like actually write things in. It's the first time I ever used a planner for more than like a day. I've used it every day so far this year.
Yeah.
Which is a week now, which is actually more impressive than I sounds, I guess. I feel like after the first 2 days you kind of lose motivation, but I've still kept up with it more or less. Even though sometimes I just use it as a checklist. It's a nice flexible planner. You know, you can just do whatever you want with it. So I other than that will be probably cooking. My friend got me a cookbook for for the Secret Santa thing because he knows that I like to cook. And I'm just gonna see if I can just make every recipe in that sucker, basically.
Whoa.
Yeah, I probably won't get that far, but I'll try. I'll give it the old college try.
You are in college.
I am in college. I'm not sure how to end this episode really because I feel like Akechigoro has kind of suffered.
Are you done dancing on his grave?
I think we're done. We're leaving that in 2018.
Aww.
But
That's so heartwarming.
But I don't really know what to replace it with, which is kind of the problem.
I mean, clearly you have to spite someone else.
I maybe, but I don't have anyone else that I like hate as much, really.
As Akechigoro.
Yeah, I just hate him so much. I don't
no one else.
Nope. No, not that I can think of. You know what? Actually, so this is completely off topic, and I can't believe that I'm like extending the ending of our podcast like this. But I don't know why, but for whatever reason, you know what got stuck in my head recently? And I know the reason. It was because I was binging Ava because of the podcast. But I got stuck in my head recently the like clip where it's just Asuka, but she's saying chance.
Chance.
What?
Chance. She's like chance.
Chance.
And then like it's I think it's one of those scenes in episode like 25 or 26 where maybe it's earlier. I don't know. It's the one where like Asuka has to hear all of the other like women voice actors say her lines. She's just like chance. 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 I don't know why I got that stuck in my head, but I did that like 40 times while making breakfast the other day.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It gets kind of weird in here. So yeah, chance.
Chance.
That's it. That's the end of the podcast.
No.
I'm just gonna end it on that.
One.
And then figure out what I should do next week.